I want to begin again with the University of Washington Tribal Land Acknowledgement. That the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. That's an acknowledgement that we're learning a lot about starting last week, continuing this week. Let me give you just 30 seconds to think about that, and we'll begin. Tonight, we have Dian Million here. She is a member and citizen of the Tanana Athabascan tribal nation in Alaska. She's been teaching at the University of Washington in American Indian Studies since 2002 and is now chair of that department, as well as being an affiliate faculty member in Canadian Studies, the Comparative History of Ideas, and the English department. She's the author of Therapeutic Nations, Healing in an Age of Indigenous Human Rights, the introductory chapter of which is on our Canvas website. She's the author as well of a number of articles, chapters, and poems, one thing I want to ask her about. As you've seen, if you've looked at the introduction to her book, she expands our range of reference to an Alaska Native and Canadian perspective, where issues can look quite different from the US perspective on which the Saksatcha focused last week. We are very grateful to Dian for her willingness to join us today in order to discuss her work and her views. We look forward to a lively and thought-provoking discussion. Welcome, Dian.
Duenta, can you hear me? Okay. So Susra Dian Million, Tagatili Aslan, Ten Quantana E Trinlan, Setsu Adbi Silas Bauzra, Setsuya Noah Albert Bauzra, Son Senzak Nazi Holman Bauzra, Seto Rex Holman Bauzra, Trinakaye Setha, Angie and Juanita. I have 4 grandsons and 4 great-grands. So that is my way of telling you that I'm from Tagatili, which is near Fairbanks, and that's how I usually introduce myself. I don't usually introduce myself as a citizen because we are corporations in Alaska, and I feel like I like to actually explain us differently, which I will a little bit today. So what I'm going to talk about, I have actually a little bit of a slideshow that I want to bring to your attention. And I want to talk about what indigeneity or actually represents in terms of an ethos, okay, of a belief system in the world. I want to differentiate us as groups of people who have been racialized in the United States, in Canada, and all over the world. And so while people might think of us as a racial group, actually what we are is the myriad societies that once inhabited lands that have been subjected to settler colonialism for many hundreds of years at this point. So whether or not the United States has made us into racial others, meaning Indian or Aboriginal or whatever, we see ourselves very differently. We see ourselves as place-based peoples, of which if I'm able to introduce myself from a place, what that meant is a set of relations that is inextricable from my identity. And so we have been diaspora, like many peoples. That means we have been through wars and impoverishment and other, ways in which people tried to dismantle our places and our nations. We have been spewed everywhere. We're in cities, we're in everywhere, you know, we're well over the place. Obviously, I'm not in Alaska right now. I live in the actually the backyard of the Nooksack and the Swinomish people. So I always talk about the way in which it was important for me when I went there as a Native person to make relations with the people that I actually lived with, because that was their place. And it was my responsibility then to them to announce myself as a friend and not an enemy, and to be helpful and to be in relation with them and their place. So I'm speaking a lot about relations right off the bat because it's real important to what I'm going to share with you. So I'm going to bring this thing up here and share the screen. The problem when you screen share is you can't get to your PowerPoint.
If you'd like, Dan, in the lower right-hand corner, there's you'll see
yeah,
a button that shows the screen.
Okay, I see it. Thank
There
you.
you go.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Easy. Okay. Part of this I tweaked from something that Nancy Turner wrote some years ago, but I thought was really useful because I felt like that it did capture some of the things that make indigeneity an ethos. And to me, an ethos means like is the character of something. It's an atmosphere, it's a climate, it's a mood, it's a feeling, it's a tenor, it's an essence, it's a disposition, a rationale, a morality, a moral code, a value system. I actually think value system is the thing that I actually point to the most, okay? It is an actual value system that exists and people have not been able to erase it for the 500 or 600 years of contact here that we have had with other value systems. So sometimes in my classes, what I do, one of the first things that I tell people, and just to shake them up a little, is that everything is living. Everything. Everything has a spirit, and everything has a power to act with you or against you or on you. Everything. So for us, that innate power, the belief of the innate power of all things to act upon us, makes us act differently in the world if we have an indigenous thought, ethos that is guiding us. It means that we have respect for other life forms, not because we think they're cute. We have respect for other life forms because we might depend on them. And most certainly if we don't respect them or treat them right, they can kill us. Our social systems were ideological systems that enforce this in very direct ways. And if you took my classes, I could lead you into that or show you a lot of examples. But because of the amount of time I have today, I'm not going to go there as much, okay? I just want to kind of like give you a set of ideas to play with here. So I talked to you about having concepts of interactive relationships with other forms, okay? And I think this is very key right now to where we're at, because people are really surprised because of the winds, the hurricanes, the fires, the floods, the blah, blah, everybody seems so, but it is not of any surprise to us, because to us, it would be the natural outcome of the way in which we are conducting ourselves at this point in time. And the last and most important thing that I want to talk about, because like everybody gets really confused by when we begin to talk about land back and sovereignty and these other kinds of concepts that we sometimes throw at you. But what we mean is place, not property. Okay, property is a Western value. Property means you think you own something. What we mean is place as a formation, a set of relations. So here are some pictures that were taken. You know, of course, we are profoundly, all of us at this point, moving into an urban landscape in which it might be really difficult to tell what place you're in. As you can see, I mean, if you look at it, you know, these kinds of formations are not unknown to us. There's nets or networks or, you know, look like spider webbing all over the world. That's because as humans, we form these natural kinds of relations, etc., but don't seem to be very responsible about knowing what their outcome or effects are. Here are some of the emerging mega regions in the United States and the globe. We're up here, Cascadia. You can see this like band of light all the way down through here. That's all now profoundly urban. Anywhere where it's lit up is really profoundly urban at this point. So I asked this question in my emerging work right now, or the work that for me is, you know, the word emerging is up there on my slide. So I flash on it a lot. You know, what is emergent? What does it mean? You know, what it means to me, at least, is that what is rising? What is rising in me right now? And what is rising in me is to try to implant an idea in people that it is not our racial difference that makes us have a gift to give the world right now. It is our ethos. It is our very different ethos. So I'm going to just read you a little bit from a piece of work that I've got in, I don't know, they're going to print it at some point. It's in editing. What does it mean to resurge our indigenous presence in these urban centers of capitalism, or actually anywhere we are, recognized or not? What would it mean to act if our presence was always potential, that our living lives otherwise is witness and transformative, morphing, having an effect on our own relations as well as on the relations of capital? I believe it is dangerous to imagine our presence in these urban places solely corrupting or corrupted, unable to acknowledge potentiality and what appears as concrete. We look to home, to land, to be the places of our heart, our spirit. I claim that anywhere we are is already an indigenous place first. An indigenous ethos rises when we take responsibility for where we are at in the power and depth of our relations and responsibility to the indigenous peoples and places we are. To know and honor their ancient relations in that place. We have a responsibility to know the languages of these places and recognize them in the land and their names for food and kinship. We need to honor and uphold these relations first, and to know that our indigenous spirit reconnects any lands we are on, even and especially when these lands appear to be encased in concrete. To remind, we already re-indigenize these places by pointing out their considerable and continuing relations to spirits and indigenous presence in prior to any settler or capitalism. So this was an indigenous place. And the problem with this way in which we're growing across the globe right now and demanding, as you know, is that it actually eats places alive. This is the same place. This is the tar sands, which is right above us, not too far. And this is before and this is after. And there's a lot of indigenous places that once were extremely full of life that now kind of look like this. I don't know what they'll look like in hundreds of years. They say they can reclaim them, but we haven't seen it. So we think this necrotic development is particularly a crime against the law of life, because in our ethos, the law of life is to promote life. Okay, it's always to promote life. That means that everything is in a cycle of life. Okay, so even the food that you eat. Food, in an indigenous sense, is always larger than the direct consumption of relations that we have with animals and waters and beings. Food evokes our cultures, our economies, our languages, our kinships, our reciprocal relations and responsibilities. Those form the 3 R's that we're always talking about. These are some of the relations and responsibilities we have in places in the North. I like this because a lot of people don't think of trees, you know, they don't think of trees like this. They see the top of trees, you know, they don't think about the roots that are in the ground. And I've always liked this image because indigenous ethos actually evokes people's relations in a place, okay? And what that means is that for me to speak about the relations I have in a specific place, any place that I'm at or whatever, I understand that those relations aren't going to be really different than the ones somebody might have 500 miles from here, further down the coast or further up the coast or further inland, just on the other side of the mountains, or because these places are that distinct. Each has its own set of relations. Each has its own needs. Each has the kinds of ways in which, you know, that it gives or doesn't give, and the time period in which it gives or doesn't give, or it's extremely specific. And that's why our ethos has been posed for a really long time, and now very interestingly at the level of the United Nations Declaration of Rights for Indigenous Peoples, posed against universalism or posed against globalism, because we are so specific. Our claims are very specific. Our asks are very specific. They're specific to a place, and this is the reason that that's true. So here is a quote from some elders they're elders now. Place is an expression of the vibrant relationships between people, their ecosystems, and other living beings and spirits. They say that the knowledge that we have of these places are intertwined with these places. They might be ancient knowledges, but they're in front and center knowledges is what they actually are, because the land is constantly changing. It constantly changes at all times, at all moments in times, over time periods or whatever. There's always been a lot of change. And so what Indigenous peoples, the ethos calls you to do is to be a learner front and center. That means that you're always learning. These aspects of knowledges are interrelated with the changes, the movement, as well as the ancientness of it, of any place. Okay. We have this really profound relationship with our food because we love the beings that it comes from. When we eat meat and people say, oh, well, I'm a vegetarian, I won't eat meat, I won't eat that. And we tell them, well, in some places that's not possible for us to eat the vegetation and live. I'm from one of those places. But the basic thing is we think everything is alive. And so just because you eat a vegetable doesn't mean you haven't taken a life. You've just taken a different kind of life. It didn't have eyes and smile at you. All life is sacred. Depends on how you take it, in what ethos, spirit you take it. So at any rate, we extend huge amounts of respect. When we are acting within the ethos of our places, we act with enormous respect towards our food, because it gives us and we give back. Well, because when we die, our bodies go back to the land and replenishes the land that the animals feed, the animals and the plants. I love this one. This is from my favorite person. This is Jeanette Armstrong, who is Okanagan syntax. Indigeneity is a viable tool toward transformation of the people to be into being part of the social order as Timics, and to be a life force in a life force place, rather than being part of the social order of depletion and destruction. I felt like that I wanted to read that whole thing to you, even though you can read it yourself, because I think it's probably key to everything. It's for us, the ethos is, how is it that we can be life producing as part of in a life producing place that produces more lives, more life on this planet, rather than being part of the destruction of something that we can't, that will have an effect on us for as long as this planet is here. Anyway, that's my relations. That's my brother and my sister and me 2 years ago. Bossy Chu. I decided to end it there so we had enough time to talk. What did I give you, 2 minutes?
Gary, you're muted.
You'd think by now we would remember to demute, right? None of us have that down. So anyway, thank you, Diane. We have half an hour. And so we do actually have a good amount of time for questions. And if people want to, like I said, in the reactions, put your hand up, raise your hand there. That would be the best way to do it. I am going to use my prerogative, though, to pose the first question, because one of the, I think, really fascinating and important things about your work is you are both a scholar and a poet. And I'd be really interested in having you talk about what you see as the role of poetry with regard to the kinds of historical understanding you want to help create. And you're also somebody who's between two languages, right? And so the role of language and languages with regard to poetry and history. So take that anywhere you want, and we'll see who else pops in.
I actually have mostly English, but I do I've made it a point to try to learn my language more, okay, because for obvious reasons, okay. A lot of people have tried to wipe our languages out, so I've made it real. But language is really important, to get back to the heart of your question. Language is really important because it's really, for humans, it's world building. Okay, I mean, we actually build our worlds through. That's why I think I call attention to language a lot, because especially in classes, because it actually, the way in which you frame reality goes through the concepts and the kinds of words that you choose. And I admit to not being the smoothest in the English language, but it's mostly the language I've had to work with. And it took me really years and years and years to write academic English, because it was so foreign to me. I had to learn it like a foreign language. But poetry was more like you speak. And for me, poetry was my first language, because we were, even though we might not have been writing things that is our dense as the things that I now write or what have you, we were definitely speaking our ideas. We were talking, and now I see the way that we spoke were like poems a lot of times, you know what I'm saying? They were dense with meaning, but they didn't need a lot of words to do it. Mm-hmm. Thanks, Gary.
Right, I like that, dense with meaning, but compact. And I use that same metaphor that you use a lot. The language frame is what we use to frame reality. I mean, a powerful metaphor, I think, for thinking about what words do. They don't just name things, they really frame them.
Yeah.
Bring them into being.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why it's really important to see, you know what I'm saying, and feel, what exactly, how narratives make worlds.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Hi, Sophie.
Go ahead. Ashlyn had the first question, so feel free to unmute, as I failed to do, and pose it.
Hi. Thank you so much for speaking. So my question is, you talked a little bit about how food is a relationship, and how is that, say, impacted by that profound urbanization of so many places?
Mostly the impact that you see a lot is just the abstraction of it. People they know that they need to eat this substance, right? In order to give themselves energy, and certainly to live, that, you're not going to go for a very long period without having some food. I don't know, I keep thinking about how many people are going diets and stuff now and all this crazy stuff, but mostly people can put a lot of things in their mouth and not know what they are. I mean, I'm probably, preaching to the choir here, but you don't know what it is. You don't know if it's an animal or a plant. You don't know what its experience was. You know, you don't know anything about it. You're totally abstracted from any knowledge of the spirit and the energy of that being. And I think that's the part that is the hardest or the strangest, is to bring people back out of the abstraction of it. You know, you're eating another being. You're actually dependent. Your life is dependent on other beings, whether it be vegetable or animal. You know, and I think it does make more sense, you know what I'm saying, because animals live such cruel lives that we don't, you know what I'm saying? If they don't have real lives, so I don't think that we should have so many present to eat just for us. I think that's a real unhealthy way to actually provide for human masses. And I think that's what we're up against at this point, because capitalization has allowed us to, you know, outgrow the places in which we once flourished, or you know, now we struggle and fight for, and it's pushed us out of places that once nourished us or gave us life. So, so yeah, most of us are pretty abstracted from food, I would say. Mm-hmm.
I want to pull a phrase out from that again that I really like, the sense that you need to know the experience of something that you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a very evocative phrase that I think is different from thinking in a narrow nutritional sort of sense, right?
Right. Like how?
Okay, next I see, and I don't know if it's SOF, soft nickname, initials. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on my phone, and it's actually Sophie, but
Okay.
yeah, I wanted to ask, I guess, about, I was just thinking about what you said near the beginning there about the climate, like, kind of catastrophe, and how we're surprised, but maybe we shouldn't be. And I was also thinking about storytelling and the ethos that how that relates to the environment. And I just was wondering if you could expand a little bit on, like, that sort of connection on, like, of like storytelling and the environment and ethos, and how those all kind of connect together in the context of the sort of climate catastrophe that we're in right now.
Well, I might have to get into like deep capitalist talk about why the narrative of surprise is there. You know what I'm saying? Because we're a risk society, you know what I'm saying, that we have been placed into a situation where we're always assessing numbers to find out, you know what I'm saying, how much the temperatures are rising, or we're that's I'm talking about another ethos is what I'm talking about. Actually, there's another ethos that is in control for the most part at this point, and the kind of information it's giving you is that this is a catastrophe, that, you know what I'm saying, that there was a normal, and then all of a sudden that we have somehow or another broken from that normal, and so there's a story being told for sure, okay, about and so each new, you know, so maybe there's even a race going on, like going, you know, comparing all the hurricanes, or comparing the floods, or, you know what I'm saying, or comparing the temperatures, or, you know, whatever it is that, you know, makes us on hyper vigilance and alert, except, and instead of just being quiet and listening to the place you're in, what's the place you're in right now telling you? You know, what are its messages to you? There's narratives outside humanity that if we're not capable of listening to, we're gonna, you know, we'll just, it just is. It's like, you know, it's obvious to everybody at this point in time that the world is not, it's not a thing. It also is a, like we are, it belongs to a whole. I'm trying to fight for words in English, it's a whole. It has every capacity of affecting us profoundly. And I don't even have to, it's not a one-way street though. It's like we live in an interactive universe. And I think that is the part that you're not totally, you do understand, but you're told it in a really different way. I think the scientist message of this right now is that we have to back down. Yeah, we do. We shouldn't be acting the way we are acting right now. It's obviously having some effects, but it's always been interactive. It's always been interactive. And so we have to figure out how to back away from the narratives of crises and surprise and death and destruction, and begin to try to begin to understand our place in it. Is that making sense?
Totally.
Right.
It's not an it either. See what English does to me?
The word that I like books that make me think of things. And one of the words that popped into my head while I was reading your introductory chapter was that we have a tendency towards datification. I made that word up, it doesn't exist. But, to see the data, for instance, climate change, newspapers recently had discussion of, we had 10 storms that caused more than $1 billion damage, and they're measuring climate change that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely. It's dollars and cents. Got it.
Okay, Tim, go ahead, and then Emma has something in the chat I'll get back to.
Actually, Gary, I'm going to pass it to Zoe. I just saw that Zoe also had her hand raised. We can save my question for later. Or was Emma next? I wasn't keeping track.
Let's go with Emma. I'm trying to watch in both places at once.
Okay.
Emma wanted to add in an example, I think. Are you there, Emma?
Hi, everyone. My name is Emma Elliott Groves. I'm Cowichan Tribes from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and I am joining you from the UW, and happy to be here. Grateful to the rain today and the animals and the things outside that are welcoming me. So thank you. I just was thinking, as Dr. Million was sharing about Indigenous understanding of food, and just wanted to provide a fairly salient story that came to me through some of my research. It was in the spring of 2014, and we had some deaths with suicide in my home community. And this is the area of scholarship that I take up. And at this time I was a graduate student, and I didn't know how I could help. I felt like I didn't have enough money. I felt like I didn't have a social work degree. I didn't have the things that I felt like I needed. And I think that is kind of speaking to sort of the settler colonial logics that Dr. Million is talking about, and how we are thinking about and framing the issues that are at hand. But anyway, to go back to the story, I explained these concerns to my mom, and I said, how am I supposed to help? And I was going home to do an independent study that literally had been written up as help my community respond to this cycle of loneliness. And I didn't know what that meant. And, but I needed to go home and figure it out. And so when I said this to my mom, she looked at me and she said, somewhat angrily, like First Nations elders do, when they know that you already know the answer. And she said, we sit and we eat together. And I thought, oh my gosh, she's right. We've been doing this for every family gathering, every celebration, every transition of life or life ceremony of any sort. We sit and we eat together during the happy times and the sad times. And when I thought deeply about what my mom meant when we sit and we eat together, I thought not only of the physical sustenance that the food brings, I also thought of what happens when we are sitting together and eating. We're asking about each other's day. We're sharing that you're important, that I care about you, that I love you. We're sharing these messages of belonging. We're also sharing these messages of purpose. We give thanks to the food that's brought to our table each and every day. We think about the animals and the life that the animal had offered us, right? We think about the cooks who had brought the food to our table, and in that gratitude, we're also reinforcing that cycle of life and reinforcing that reciprocity and reinforcing that belongingness, that we too belong somewhere here, so long as we are being responsible and respectful. And then I think about, you know, even on a emotional or bodily or mental health level, we're co-regulating our emotions for each other. And this is actually a sympathetic nervous system, you know, component of being together in space. And culturally, we have these ideas around food that are about, you know, not only giving thanks and gratitude and prayer and reciprocity, but they're also the intentions that go into the food process and the food making. You ingest those intentions. So if you have a good heart with prayer while you're making the food, you're also going to ingest those good feelings and those good intentions. So nonetheless, when my mom said we sit and we eat together, she was talking about the fact that trauma heals in that presence of caring others, but in the sense from a cultural standpoint, from a physical nourishment standpoint, from an emotional nourishment standpoint, from a spiritual nourishment standpoint. We talk with our kids about things like this fresh water. Our ancestors have been drinking this fresh water for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, the exact same water, right? We don't make up enough water. We don't make more water. So that gives us some sort of an understanding of ourselves across long, long periods of time. And then I also remember Winona LaDuke sharing a story about goji berries and how everyone in Seattle is always like organic and grass-fed, and I want to eat all this special food. And we don't actually think about the fact that these goji berries are very sacred foods for people in where they grow, and that, you know, and when she was giving her talk, she said, Lord forbid I'm the last person to ever eat a goji berry, you know. And it's the same things that we think about, like quinoa, for example. You know, all of our diets and all of our health food and nutrient dense and paleo this and that and the other thing, and we're all about quinoa, without realizing that quinoa is a complete staple for people in South America. And we're sitting here driving up the price so much so that they can't even afford to eat it. So it's about being intentional and about being locally specific and about having that understanding of the importance of something just like food and sitting and eating together, and what that impact has on not only the land, but also all of the different components of health. So that's my 2 cents about food.
That is lovely. The other thing I want to bring, because Emma said it so beautifully. So you can see that what people call government, our governance, the way in which we made an order in a place, stemmed straight from this way in which we were given these way of life, or given these foods in this place. And for us, in order for it to go on forever, to, you know, for it to be a life-giving place, for it to go on for beyond us, and to actually go ahead and order, you know, how we acted towards each other, we're not separate from it. So when we begin to start talking about, because, you know, of a lot of my writings and stuff like that, and they have to do with how people govern themselves. I put that ethos, you know what I'm saying? Those places right at the center. There's no real governance. You can't govern the upper coast. You know what I'm saying? From the middle of Alaska. You can't, you know, the people down in the South, and you can't govern from Texas, the people up in the Northwest, because the actual way, the order, you know what I'm saying, that has to be there, has to be from there, because that's where life orders you. So that's what I've been going around saying lately. I've been saying the land governs us. We don't govern any land. land governs us. So thank you, Emma.
Yes, thank you. That was very eloquent. Zoe, you have a question.
Hi, just to also touch on what Emma brought up about the goji berries and about quinoa, I was wondering if you can bring more awareness on food insecurity and also different methods that are being used to kind of work around this big issue. Like I was doing research on the Tuolumne tribe, how their the hatcheries of their salmon is very different than the American way. But I was wondering if you also had more information that I can like learn from.
Well, from what I understand, and everybody could, you know, like weigh in on this, but from what I understand is that, you know, wherever we're at, I mean, food insecurity comes from basically a lack of share, okay? It doesn't necessarily come from a lack of food, okay? I really believe that the food is there and that the earth gives these places are still really productive, even in cities. I think, you know, it's really seems healthy to get foods from outside of your area and stuff like that. People like keep mentioning quinoa and stuff like that. That's nice. Does it grow there? You know, when does it grow at your, you know, place where you're at? You know what I'm saying? What does grow there? You know what I'm saying? Can you have it there? Is there any, and that's, I think, maybe what I was kind of getting at that the ethos that we have could re-indigenize these places. Re-indigenizing any place would mean to try to get it to look at what it locally can give and not give. Okay, right now we're at the height of capitalism that is not feeding anybody. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people on the streets living in tents. You know what I'm saying? With the worst kind of nutrition that you can possibly have. There's no reason why folks can't be sheltered and fed. It's not a matter of scarcity. We keep saying this. The places that we live are hugely abundant. The earth is still hugely abundant. It's the system we're living in. So I'm virulently anti-capitalist. And urge people, you know what I'm saying? But I'm also not socialist. I'm an indigenist. I believe that our ethos has something to give in terms of, you know what I'm saying? Talking to people about actually, if you are not just here for the extraction of wealth, of bodies, of materials, of, you know, whatever thingification that you have come here to extract, then there is enough. Okay, there's enough. But in the meantime, you know, it's very difficult. I feel like people shouldn't be isolated from each other either. I feel like people should have, as best they can, relations. Find relations in a place. You know what I'm saying? Find ways in which you might. My grandson in Portland right now, he's with a group of people that are trying to do this care work. You know what I'm saying? Creating ways in which to stop people from losing houses, homes, and from being hungry. They've started all kinds of food kitchens, even though the cops keep running them out of this place and that places, you know what I'm saying? They continue to organize. But there's a lot of ways in which that organizing that we do, you know what I'm saying, is not a drop in the bucket. It's real, you know what I'm saying? But feeling isolated and worrying about the problem all by yourself, you know what I'm saying, is just exactly what capitalism wants you to do. I want you to be in crisis mode all the time. You know what I'm saying? So there's ways in which what you need to do is find a family, you know what I'm saying? If your family and you cannot, you know what I'm saying, do this kind of comfort and care work together, You know what I'm saying? Make relations that give comfort and care. You know, that's one of the things that, you know, that happened at home a lot with us. We were hit by many waves of, you know, this pandemic was not the first. We were hit by a really bad pandemic of tuberculosis in my grandmother's generation. And there was a huge amount of orphans and people left who were ill and had to be taken care of. And people reformed families. They literally reformed, you know what I'm saying? They came together again in family formations to care for each other. And so it was, you know, it's our form. It's not like, again, it's not like this thing that's just natural. Oh, we're part of a family that you can trace us back to the Middle Ages or something. No, our families are actually living relationships of which we reform and form again. And I think that's what I was trying to illustrate on that a little bit on my slides is that, you know, that these relations in places are, you can form them, you can form families, okay? Indigenous peoples who are isolated in cities particularly need to remember that they can form kinships themselves. I probably went way off from what you were talking about, but.
Tim?
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Million. This has been just a wonderful conversation. I just put something in the chat, by the way, which may be of interest to folks, just highlighting the work of the Chief Seattle Club here in Seattle doing, I think maybe sounds like similar work to what your grandson might be doing. But at any rate, I did have a question that maybe will bring us.
Without the social work part.
Okay, great. Sorry, I'm just reading another comment in the chat here too. I wanted to maybe just take us back to last week as well, where Isak Sicha talked a lot about land acknowledgements, as well as historical trauma. And I guess I wanted to get your perspective on land back, which is something that you mentioned very briefly at the beginning of your talk today. And I think you may have already, in a sense, answered this question, but your perspective on the idea of land back, and also to connect this to your book, where I have a quote that I think I've drawn, or rough quote from the book. You talk about the land culture connection as a way of healing historical trauma. So I guess
I go on and on and on about that quite a bit, because I think that, you know, it's something that's kind of misunderstood. Culture and land are not separate, you know, and I think what the problem that I was having is that people were saying somehow that there was this magic culture that, you know what I'm saying, that was not produced in a place, that somehow that you could, you know, somehow make people well, you know what I'm saying, by just anything, you know, anything. I don't know how can I say it. I think I'm thinking in terms of a very, what's the word for it? When it means like, kind of like very abstract notions of culture. Okay, let's put it that way. All right. I really think that a lot of times, you know what I'm saying, that people really totally misunderstand that these cultures come from places. Like that's what I kept saying today. And that's what I said in the book too. And it says that people had this profound idea, you know what I'm saying, that culture was healing. Well, it is healing, but it's healing when it's in connection with a place, okay? It's healing when it learns from living in good relations with other people in a place. And what they found was profoundly healing was sometimes is when those people actually fought back. They fought back their victimization. They didn't feel like victims anymore. They got up and fought for their lands. That's when healing really began to happen, not in the feeling of victimhood and waiting for someone to heal them. You know what I'm saying? With a feather motif or a this or a that. I don't, put down the way in which we smudge or do things, you know what I'm saying, that seem very intertribal. But I know very deeply from my own experience too, is that who we are here is what's healing. For us to actually know who we are here is something that generations of settler colonialists have tried to take away from us by erasing our lands, locking us away from or taking us away from our parentage, putting us in residential schools. The thing that I was pointing to around, I said, without the social work part, like always taking children, you know what I'm saying? Because there is a real misunderstanding of a so-called cultural difference or what have you. No, the reason that we have been endangered here is because we were racialized. We got in the way. It's because of our land. It's because people wanted our land. And in order to get our land, they have to remove us from our land. And yes, the dissolution of our families and all the hardships that have come with being treated this way is what exactly has, you know what I'm saying, caused our so-called illnesses. So that's what I mean, as that health has to do with connection. Health has to do with taking your power back. Health has to do with knowing that your ethos actually means something in the world. It's not primitive. There's the Western cultures don't have this lock-in trajectory of progress, that somehow or another, that all the other knowledges that were produced by other peoples on this planet, you know what I'm saying, have nothing to say or nothing to give. So, that's what I said.
Thank you.
Yes.
And obviously that, and again, the ethos is predicated on access to the place.
Yeah,
right?
and he's right. I don't know if the land acknowledgements are important, but without the action of people, you know what I'm saying, of actually making land, you know what I'm saying, not a piece of property, but being in like an ally of those peoples who want to re-indigenize places, do it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's the point, is that it's not land back like property back. It's land back like this is indigenous place. Let indigenous knowledge live here. Let indigenous peoples live here. Yeah, it is. There's ways in which the places where people have claims and communities and stuff like that. Yes, that is their place. Don't invade them. But it's also not to think of these other places that we don't think of as indigenous as no longer indigenous. You know what I'm saying? To me, that's real land back.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. That's a very powerful answer, I think, and one that gives all of us, I think, something to think about as far as how we can be an ally in this mission of re-indigenizing. Excellent. Gary, how much time do we have? We probably need to start wrapping up, I think.
Yeah, we are at the end of the hour. And so, Sean, maybe you can stop recording. We certainly have the Zoom link if people do want to stick around, and if Diane has a few more minutes,